the night the Marine's heart stopped, nobody looked at the new nurse twice. They'd already decided who mattered in this room. The doctor with the perfect hair, the glowing monitors, the clean rules on the wall. But tell me this when the line goes flat and your world collapses into one ruthless second, do titles save you or does skill? Outside St. Bridget Regional in Savannah, rain hammered the ambulance doors and the waiting room smelled like wet jackets and old coffee. Inside Trauma 1, a young Marine lay broken from an I-95 wreck, and an arrogant ER physician chased the wrong diagnosis while the clock ate him alive. In the corner, Claire Morgan stood, quiet hands, steady eyes locked on the wound like she'd seen this kind of death before. Stay with me. By the end, you'll know what real leadership looks like when medicine turns into war. If you're watching from somewhere right now, hit like drop your city in the comments and don't blink. A moment like that never begins with a flatline. It begins hours earlier in the quiet parts of a hospital where nobody thinks they are standing on the edge of history. St. Bridget Regional sat just far enough from downtown Savannah to feel forgotten. The building squatted near the marsh roads where palmettos bent under wind and salt air, and at night the parking lot lights made the rain look like it was falling in sheets of glass. Inside, the heat always ran too warm, as if the hospital was trying to comfort itself. The waiting room was a collage of ordinary suffering. A man in a work vest hunched over a trash can, breathing through nausea. A teenage girl cradled her wrist and stared at the vending machine like it had personally betrayed her. An elderly woman dozed upright with her purse locked against her ribs chin, bobbing every time the automatic doors whooshed open and let in the smell of wet asphalt. Behind the double doors, the emergency department moved on muscle memory. Phones rang. Printers chattered. The intercom crackled with mispronounced names. Somewhere a child cried in sharp, exhausted bursts. The heart monitors kept their small, steady songs an electronic chorus that made you forget how thin the line was between stable and gone. Claire Morgan did not forget. She moved through the night shift like a person trained to leave no footprint. Her scrubs were a size too large, the kind you grabbed when the linen closet was low, and you did not want anyone to notice you cared. The fabric hung loose at the shoulders and waist, hiding the hard lines of a body that did not belong to someone who spent her life in a quiet clinic. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun that looked more like discipline than style. She wore no jewelry, no perfume, nothing that could catch a hand snag on equipment or linger in someone's memory. If the staff had tried to describe her later, most of them would have struggled. Middle-aged, plain, efficient, quiet. The kind of nurse who stocked gloves and took vitals without turning it into a story. Claire liked it that way. She started her shift the way she always did. She checked the crash cart seal. She checked the airway supplies. She checked that the suction worked and that the spare oxygen tank was full. She ran her fingers over the latches and zippers without looking, counting by touch. The movements were fast, precise, practiced. Not fussy, not anxious, just certain. When she finished, she walked past the nurse's station where Jess Park was balancing 2 cups of bad coffee and a stack of intake forms, her ponytail frizzing from humidity and stress. Jess was young enough to still think the night shift could be fun if you had the right playlist. She was bright-eyed in a way that meant she had not been broken by repetition yet. She smiled at Claire like it mattered that someone else was there. "You want one?" Jess asked, lifting a cup. Claire glanced at the coffee. It smelled like scorched beans and regret. "I'm fine," she said. Jess rolled her eyes but kept the smile. "You say that every night." Claire did not answer. She took the clipboard from Jess's hands and flipped through the triage notes. Her eyes moved quickly, absorbing details the way a person reads weather. Chest pain, 68 diabetic. Fall possible head injury. Abdominal pain unknown. Anxiety attack. Alcohol intoxication. A child with a fever that had climbed too high for a parent to feel brave. Claire handed the clipboard back. Bed 7 needs a reassessment. His pain score jumped. Jess blinked. "I have not even looked at 7 since triage." Claire was already walking. "Then you should." Jess watched her go, then hurried after her as if being close to Claire made the air steadier. Bed 7 was a man in his 50s with sweat on his upper lip and an oxygen cannula tugging at his cheeks. His eyes darted to the monitor every few seconds like he was trying to catch it lying. Claire slid a blood pressure cuff on his arm and spoke softly, not to comfort him with pretty words, but to anchor him in reality. "Tell me where it hurts," she said. He pointed to his upper abdomen. "It's burning, like someone poured fire down my throat." Claire took his wrist, counted his pulse with 2 fingers, watched his face. She listened to his lungs, then pressed gently along his belly. He flinched at the right spot, not dramatically, just enough. She looked at the chart. He had been labeled reflux and parked. It was common, it was easy, it was wrong often enough to be dangerous. Claire stepped into the hall and caught the first resident. She saw a thin man with a badge that still looked too new. "Dr. Bed 7 needs a full abdominal workup," she said. The resident frowned, already defensive. "He has reflux." The attending signed off. Claire met his eyes. Hers were calm, almost blank. "His pain is rising and his pressure is narrowing," she said. "He is sweating through a gown in an air-conditioned room." The resident's mouth tightened. He glanced toward the physician's station as if checking who might hear him taking advice from a nurse. "I will look," he said, voice flat. Claire nodded once, then went back to the bed and finished the vitals without another word. The man watched her hands and breathed a little slower as if her quiet certainty was medicine. Back at the nurse's station, Jess leaned in, voice low. "You do that a lot," Jess said. "You spot things before anyone else." Claire's fingers moved across the keyboard as she charted. "It is my job." Jess tilted her head. "Most people do not do it like that." Claire did not look up. "Most people are tired." Jess snorted. "You're tired too." Claire's hands paused for half a second, then kept typing. "Tired is not a reason," Claire said. Jess opened her mouth to push again, then Dr. Nolan Pierce arrived like a storm that thought it was sunshine. Pierce was in his 30s and had the kind of face people trusted on sight. A strong jaw, white teeth, hair that looked styled even under surgical cap rules. He wore his white coat like a costume, and his badge like it owed him something. If you asked him, he would tell you he was saving lives. If you watched closely, you would see that he was saving himself first. He slapped a chart onto the counter, Morgan. Claire did not jump. She did not even flinch. She kept her eyes on the screen. Pierce's voice rose theatrical. "I asked for bed 9. This is bed 10. Claire turned her head slightly. "Bed 9 is in radiology." Pierce stared at her like she had committed a personal offense by being correct. "I did not ask for a status update. I asked for the chart." Claire reached under the counter and slid the correct chart out without looking, as if she had already prepared for him to be wrong and loud. Pierce snatched it. "Do not think for me," he said. "It does not suit you." Jess's face tightened, but she said nothing. That was the way the night shift worked. You swallowed what you could not change because the hospital did not care about feelings. It cared about flow. Pierce turned to Jess. "And get me a warm blanket for room 3. She is complaining." Jess forced a polite nod. "Yes, doctor." Pierce walked away with a slight swagger, as if the hallway was a stage and he was performing for invisible applause. Jess waited until he was out of earshot, then leaned toward Claire. "How do you not lose it?" she whispered. "He talks to you like you are furniture." Claire kept her gaze on the monitor. "Furniture does not bleed." Jess blinked. "What does that mean?" Claire's expression did not change. "It means he is loud because he is afraid." Jess glanced down the hall where Pierce was laughing with a pharmaceutical representative near the vending machines. He did not look afraid. He looked like he owned the building. Jess lowered her voice further. "People say he got the night shift lead because his dad sits on the board." Claire typed a final note and saved it. "People say a lot." Jess studied her face. "You never gossip." Claire stood and reached for a stack of syringes. "Gossip is a hobby. I do not have hobbies." Jess followed her toward the supply room, still trying to crack the shell. "You have been here, what, a few months?" Jess asked. Nobody knows anything about you. Where did you work before Savannah? Claire stopped in the supply room doorway. The fluorescent light above made her skin look paler, sharper. She rolled up her sleeves to wash her hands, and for a moment the plain scrubs did not hide what she kept buried. A jagged scar ran along her forearm, raised and uneven. Not a kitchen accident. Not a childhood fall. It looked like something that had tried to take the limb and failed. Jess's eyes widened. Claire, what happened to you? Claire glanced at the scar like it belonged to someone else. She pulled her sleeve down. A car door, she said. Jess did not buy it. That is not a car door scar. Claire turned on the faucet and washed her hands slowly, methodically, scrubbing under her nails like a ritual. The water ran hot. Her skin turned pink. I worked at a clinic, Claire said, voice even. In Kansas. Mostly flu shots and ankle sprains. Jess scoffed. That is boring. Claire dried her hands and tossed the paper towel into the bin. Boring is safe? Jess tried to laugh, but it came out thin. You say that like you have been someplace unsafe. Claire's eyes met hers. There was no threat in them, but there was something that made Jess stop talking. The look of someone who had measured danger in real units, not stories. Claire turned back to the shelves and began restocking IV catheters without another word. Her hands moved fast, precise counting. Jess watched unsettled by how competent she was at something nobody praised. When Claire left the supply room, she found a patient in the hall trying to stand without help. An older man, wobbly gown open at the back, dignity hanging by a thread. Sir Claire said gently, stepping in. Let me help you. He looked embarrassed. I just need the bathroom. Claire offered her arm and walked with him, matching his pace. She did not rush him. She did not scold. She moved like the hallway belonged to him for those few steps. He glanced at her badge. You knew. Claire smiled politely, knew enough. He nodded, as if that answered a larger question. You are quiet. Quiet is good. Loud people make me nervous. Claire guided him into the restroom and waited outside, one hand resting on the wall, eyes scanning the hall. Out of habit, she did not acknowledge. The hospital was not a battlefield, but her body did not always believe that. When the man came out, he looked relieved and a little ashamed. Thank you, he said. Claire nodded. You are welcome. Back at the station, the unit secretary Maria was rubbing her temples. The printers are jammed again, she muttered. Of course they are. Claire walked behind the desk, opened the printer tray, removed the crumpled paper in one smooth motion, and closed it again. Maria stared. How did you do that? Claire shrugged. It is a machine. Maria laughed softly. You make everything look easy. Claire did not answer. She returned to charting. The hours crawled. The waiting room filled and emptied in waves. A man came in yelling about chest pain, then admitted he only wanted a refill for anxiety meds. A woman cried because her mother's blood pressure was high and she did not know what the numbers meant. A toddler threw up onto a nurse's shoes and then fell asleep with his cheek against his father's shoulder, eyelashes wet. Claire moved through it all, steady, invisible, reliable. Pierce drifted in and out of rooms, talking louder than necessary, leaving messes in his wake that other people cleaned without thanks. He flirted with the idea of compassion when someone was watching, then snapped when the hallway was empty. At one point, he returned to the nurse's station and slapped a chart down again. Morgan, he said, why is bed 5 still waiting? Claire looked at the board. Because you have not assessed bed 5. Pierce's mouth tightened. Excuse me. Claire kept her tone polite. Bed 5 is abdominal pain. You went into bed 6 twice. Pierce leaned closer, lowering his voice like a warning. You are here to assist, not to correct me. Claire met his gaze. Yes, doctor. Jess watched from the side, her fists curling around a pen. After Pierce left, Jess exhaled sharply. He is going to get someone killed, Jess said. Claire's eyes stayed on the board. Not tonight. Jess frowned. How can you say that? Claire clicked through vitals. Because I am here. The words were quiet, almost accidental. Jess heard them anyway and felt a chill. Not fear exactly, but recognition that she did not know the person standing next to her. A little after midnight, the rain intensified. Thunder rolled low far away like heavy equipment moving across the sky. The automatic doors hissed open again and again as wet people stumbled in, dripping on the tile. Claire stepped into the staff room for a moment and drank water. She did not scroll her phone. She did not check messages. She opened her locker instead and stared at the few items inside: spare socks, a plain sweater, a paperback with a cracked spine, and a small toiletry kit. Everything was practical, nothing sentimental. She closed the locker and returned to the floor. Jess was at the desk, half asleep on her feet. "It is too quiet," Jess said. Claire glanced around. "Quiet is when you catch up." Jess yawned. "Quiet is when my brain starts thinking." Claire's eyes flicked to the red phone on the wall. It hung there like an omen nobody wanted to acknowledge. A direct line to emergency dispatch. When it rang, life changed. Jess noticed Claire looking. "Does that thing ever ring?" Claire did not answer right away. Then she said yes. Jess tried to smile. Well, maybe not tonight. Claire's face remained neutral. Maybe. Pierce walked by again, sipping coffee, looking bored. "If I do not get 1 hour of calm," he muttered, "I am going to lose my mind." Claire watched him pass. Her eyes did not judge him. They measured him. Then the red phone rang. The first ring cut through the ER like a blade. The second ring did not happen because Claire's hand was already on the receiver. "Emergency," she said. Her voice changed the moment she spoke into the line. The softness disappeared. The words came out crisp, controlled, sharpened by purpose. "This is Morgan." Jess straightened as if yanked by a string. Claire listened without blinking. Her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, not because she was staring, but because she was building a picture from someone else's panic. She asked only what mattered. How long pinned? Vitals, airway, mechanism, penetrating. Where, how much blood, ETA. Jess watched her heart tapping hard against her ribs. Claire's posture was different now. Taller somehow. Shoulders set, weight balanced on the balls of her feet as if she might move fast. Claire spoke again, voice precise. "Copy. Trauma activation. Bring him in hot. Do not waste time in the bay." She hung up and turned. The nurse's station felt like it leaned toward her. Even the monitors seemed quieter, as if listening. Jess swallowed. "What is it?" Claire did not raise her voice, but everyone heard her anyway. "Multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 95, Claire said. 3 inbound. 1 critical male. Pinned for a long time. Hypotensive. Penetrating chest trauma." The word chest trauma landed like a weight. Pierce turned from the hallway, annoyed, coffee still in hand. "I will decide if it is critical," he said. Claire looked at him, calm, factual. Blood pressure 80/40. Pulse 130. Shallow respirations. Pierce's eyebrows lifted, his irritation shifting toward performance. "Fine. Prep trauma 1. Just get the fluid warmer going. Respiratory, I want you ready. Morgan, you handle paperwork." Claire did not argue. She did not roll her eyes. She nodded once. "Yes, doctor," she said. Pierce stepped closer, lowering his voice to a private hiss. "Stay out of my way. Do not make tonight about you." Claire held his gaze for a beat. Her eyes were clear, almost empty, like a lake that looked calm because it was deep. "It is not about me," she said. Pierce snorted and walked off, barking orders that sounded impressive to anyone who did not know the difference between volume and competence. Jess moved beside Claire, suddenly nervous. "You sounded different on the phone," she whispered. "Like you were not even you." Claire reached into a cabinet and pulled out a pair of gloves, then another pair, placing them in her pocket. She checked the trauma bay with quick, efficient movements, making sure the airway tray was complete. The suction was ready. The chest tube kit was present. The blood tubing was accessible. She did not rush. She did not fumble. She moved like someone who had done this without electricity, without enough hands, without a second chance. Jess watched her and felt her own chest tighten. "Claire," she said softly, "how do you know all this?" Claire looked up. For a moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Not warmth, not fear, something like distance. "I pay attention," Claire said. Jess wanted to push to demand an answer that made sense in a normal world. But the world was changing already. The air in the ER had shifted. People were moving faster. Voices sharpened. The routine patients became background noise as the department reoriented toward incoming violence. The doors to Trauma 1 were open now. Bright light spilled into the hallway. The bed was positioned. The monitor was ready. The crash cart sat like a loaded gun. Claire stood just outside the trauma bay and listened. Not to the monitors, not to Pierce's voice, to the building itself. Far away, through concrete and rain and distance, she heard the thin, rising wail of sirens approaching, growing louder, then multiplying, as if the night had decided to bring its worst to their door. The sirens did not arrive like a sound. They arrived like pressure. At first, it was distant, threaded through the rain, a thin wail that rose and fell somewhere out on the highway. Then it multiplied, the way wolves multiply when you realize you are the thing being hunted. The tone thickened until it vibrated in the glass of the automatic doors and in the bones of everyone standing near Trauma 1. Jess moved without being told, pulling the warmer closer, checking tubing hands, shaking just enough to make her angry at herself. A respiratory therapist jogged past with a bag valve mask hair damp from the ambulance bay draft. Maria's printer jammed again, and she abandoned it mid-curse when the charge nurse shouted for a runner. Claire stood at the threshold of the trauma bay with her gloves already on. She watched the hallway the way a soldier watches a ridgeline. Her face did not tighten. Her breathing did not change. She looked as if she had been waiting for this exact moment all night. The ambulance bay doors blew open and the rain came in sideways. Paramedics burst through, pushing a gurney that rattled over the tile. Their boots left water prints that looked like dark bruises. The lead medic was drenched shoulders, heaving voice loud enough to cut through the chaos. "Male 30, Staff Sergeant Ethan Hale, United States Marine Corps," he shouted. "MVC on I-95, pinned in the cab. Extraction 40 minutes. Penetrating chest trauma and abdominal impalement. We had to cut the metal to pull him free. Fragment still present in left upper quadrant. Hypotensive the entire ride. Altered. We lost his radial pulse twice and got it back with fluids. On the stretcher, Ethan looked less like a person and more like a broken statue hauled out of wreckage. His camis were cut open, dark with blood that had soaked into fabric and then cooled. His face was pale under grime eyes half open, but unfocused lips cracked and gray. Dr. Nolan Pierce stepped forward as if the trauma bay were his stage. "All right," Pierce said, snapping on gloves. "Bring him over. On my count, 1, 2, 3. The transfer was messy. Ethan groaned as they shifted him a wet sound that made Jess flinch. Someone's elbow bumped the monitor. The heart rate spiked and then steadied. Pierce leaned in pen light, flashing. "Huey, patent," the medic said. "He's protecting, breathing shallow." A resident hovered at Pierce's shoulder, young and pale eyes darting. His badge read Dr. Malik Carter. He looked like he had memorized every trauma algorithm and still did not know what blood smelled like up close. Pierce took command the way he took everything by force. "Breath sounds," Pierce ordered. Dr. Carter pressed a stethoscope against Ethan's chest. The metal head sank into skin slick with sweat and blood. Carter's brows knitted. "Diminished on the left," Carter said. "Possible hemothorax, crepitus." Pierce nodded like that was the answer he wanted. "Chest tube tray. Now. 2 large bore IVs type and cross. Get me O negative on standby." Claire was in the back corner, exactly where Pierce told her to be. She did not look bored. She did not look impressed. Her eyes moved with ruthless efficiency. Ethan's chest did not rise evenly. One side lagged like a wing torn mid-flight. The veins in his neck stood up too hard for a man this close to dying. His skin was cool and clammy, but the sweat on his forehead looked hot. Claire watched Pierce's hands. They moved fast, but not clean. Fast, like someone trying to outrun fear. Jess slipped to Claire's side, voice low. "He's really going to do a chest tube right now." Claire did not answer. Her eyes were on Ethan's face. On the way, his jaw tightened every time he tried to pull air. On the way, his eyes fluttered like he was fighting sleep with everything he had left. A nurse called out the blood pressure. 82/46. Pierce exhaled sharply. "We need to decompress. Carter, prep." Claire's mind ran through a pattern she did not allow herself to name. Uneven chest rise, distended neck veins, narrow pressure. The trauma was loud, but the heart was quiet. That was the problem. She stepped forward one pace. Dr. Claire said not loud, just clear. "Look at his neck." Pierce snapped his head toward her eyes, sharp with irritation. "Morgan, you were told paperwork." Claire pointed with two fingers, not dramatic, just precise. "Jugular veins. They're distended." Pierce glanced and dismissed it in the same motion. "He's in shock. He's hypovolemic." Claire's voice stayed calm. "His heart sounds are muffled." Dr. Carter looked up startled, as if he had not considered that anyone outside physicians could hear what he heard. Pierce's jaw flexed. "You are not diagnosing. Step back." Claire did not step back. She did not step closer either. She held her ground. "If you put a tube in without checking the pericardium, you can make it worse," Claire said. "Pressure is building around the heart." Pierce stared at her for half a second, disbelief curdling into anger. "Do you hear yourself?" he said. "You are a nurse." Claire kept her eyes on Ethan. "He is dying." Pierce leaned in, voice low and venomous. "I am the physician in charge. If you undermine me in my trauma bay again, I will have you escorted out." Claire's expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened like a blade catching light. "You can escort me after he has a heartbeat," she said. For a moment, the room stilled the way a room stills when it senses a line has been crossed. Then Pierce turned away with a short laugh that had no humor in it. "Scalpel," he said. Jess's hands trembled as she passed the tray. Pierce made the incision with the confidence of someone who had practiced on mannequins and still believed mannequins were the same as men. The first rush of blood was dark and thick, not bright arterial. It poured like it had been waiting. The monitor beeped faster. Ethan's body tensed, then sagged. Dr. Carter's voice rose thin and scared. "Rhythm is changing." The line on the monitor lost its shape. It jittered and whipped like a snake. Pierce's mask cracked. V-fib. Start compressions. Pads on. Charge to 200. Hands hit Ethan's chest. Jess flinched at the sound, the dull thud of life being forced. A nurse called out. No pulse. Pierce barked, shock. Claire's voice cut through the noise like a command on a range. "No." It was not loud, it was absolute. The hands paused mid-compression. A half-second of hesitation, a whole lifetime in trauma time. Pierce spun around, face flushing. "Security," he shouted. "Get her out of here, now." Two guards appeared in the doorway again. Big men in soft uniforms, eyes wide, uncertain which danger to choose. Claire did not look at them. She looked at Pierce, and for the first time there was something unmistakable in her gaze. Not defiance, not anger. Authority. "You cannot shock a heart that cannot fill," Claire said. "You are shocking a cage." Pierce's mouth opened, then closed. He swallowed hard and tried to recover control by force. "Resume compressions," he snapped. "Ignore her." Dr. Carter's hands went back to Ethan's chest. The compressions were strong, desperate. Ethan's body rocked with each push, but the monitor did not care. The line flattened. The room went quiet in the way people go quiet when they are trying not to admit what they see. Pierce stared at the screen, then at the clock on the wall as if time could be negotiated. "Time of death." Pierce started, voice hoarse. Claire moved. Not rushed, not panicked, just sudden. The guards stepped forward, but she looked at them, and they stopped, as if their feet had been nailed to the tile. She went to the instrument tray. It was a mess of blood and metal. She did not touch what was contaminated. She grabbed a fresh scalpel from a sealed pack with hands that did not shake. Jess's breath caught. Claire. Claire did not answer. She ripped the drape back from Ethan's chest. The gesture was sharp, almost violent, but not careless. It was the way you clear space when a life is pinned under debris. Pierce grabbed her arm. Do not touch him. Claire twisted free with a movement so fast and clean that Pierce's fingers closed on air. Pierce's voice broke into a shout. Police! Call the police right now! Claire leaned in close to Ethan's face. His eyes were half open, unfocused, glassy. His lips moved as if he were trying to speak, but no sound came. Her voice dropped into something private. Stay with me, Sergeant. Jess took a step closer, trembling. This is surgery, she whispered, as if naming it made it more real. Claire held out her left hand without looking away from Ethan. Retractor. Jess hesitated only a fraction, then placed the instrument into Claire's palm. She did it the way you hand a weapon to someone who knows how to use it. Pierce stared, frozen, horrified. You cannot. Claire did not argue. She acted. Her movements were efficient, controlled, almost graceful in their brutality. The trauma bay did not feel like a hospital anymore. It felt like the inside of a storm. Dr. Carter backed away, stunned. What is she doing? He whispered. Pierce's voice came out small. She's opening the chest. The words landed like a punch. Pierce knew the concept. He had read it. He had tested on it. He had never seen it done. Not here. Not like this. Claire's hands disappeared into the wound with the steadiness that made Jess feel dizzy. There was blood. There was heat. There was a horrible intimacy to it, the way the body became both fragile and mechanical. Claire found what she was looking for with the certainty of someone navigating by memory, not by hope. Pressure released with a sudden dark spill like a sealed container finally vented. The air changed. The tension in the room shifted. It was subtle, but the difference was there. Under Claire's hand, Ethan's heart gave a weak flutter. Not a miracle. A response. Claire's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing with focus. Her voice snapped back into command. Epinephrine, she said. Now. Jess spun to the crash cart, fingers fumbling and then finding speed. Epi coming. Pierce stood at the edge of the bay, mouth open, eyes wide, trapped between outrage and the terrible realization that he might be watching competence he did not possess. Dr. Carter stared at the monitor, voice shaking. We have a beat, a single beep, then another. Then the rhythm caught, fragile at first, then steadier like a fire that had been coaxed back from embers. Dr. Carter's eyes filled not with joy, but with shock at what he had just witnessed. We have a pulse, Carter said louder now. We have a pulse. The words sparked motion again. Staff surged forward. Someone hung blood, someone adjusted oxygen, someone called ICU. Claire did not step away. She held Ethan's life in her hands, with a directness that made everyone else feel like they were watching from behind glass. She looked up at Pierce. Her face was speckled with blood, but her eyes were clear. Get the blood running, Claire said. Do not drip it, run it. Pierce swallowed pride, trying to rise and failing. Transport he managed. Get transport. Jess looked at Claire like she was seeing her for the first time. How she whispered. How did you know? Claire did not answer. She shifted her weight and moved with the gurney as the team began to roll her body, positioned where she needed to be, hands steady, focus, unbroken. They pushed through the corridor wheels, rattling alarms, chirping staff, parting like water. The ER around them blurred, but Claire's attention never left Ethan. He was alive, barely, but alive. They reached the elevator. The doors opened with a soft chime that felt absurdly polite for what they were carrying. A transport tech hesitated when he saw the state of Ethan. The blood, Claire's hands, the raw reality of it. Claire's voice was calm. Hold the doors. The tech obeyed without thinking. Jess squeezed into the elevator too. clutching the crash meds bag, face, pale eyes locked on Claire's hands as if afraid to blink. As the doors slid shut, the ER fell behind them. The noise dulled. The fluorescent light inside the elevator buzzed overhead. Jess's voice came out in a whisper. "Claire, who are you?" Claire did not look at her. She kept her eyes on Ethan's monitor, on the numbers on the fragile rhythm that could vanish if the world shook wrong. "I am doing my job," Claire said. The elevator rose, carrying them toward ICU, toward sterility, toward the part of the hospital that pretended life and death were orderly. Downstairs, left behind in Trauma 1, Nolan Pierce stood in the blood and the silence, staring at the empty space where Claire had been. His hands were still in gloves that were not clean anymore. He yanked them off with a violent snap and threw them into the biohazard bin like they had betrayed him. "Call security," Pierce said, voice shaking with rage he could not control. "Call the police." Maria lifted the phone with trembling fingers. Pierce leaned over the counter, eyes hard, constructing his story as if the truth were just another procedure he could cut around. "That woman," he said, "that nurse. She just assaulted my staff and butchered a Marine in my trauma bay." And as the rain kept hammering the windows, the first red and blue flashes of incoming patrol cars began to paint the wet pavement outside. The first patrol car arrived with its lights off until the driver turned into the ambulance ramp. Then the red and blue reflections slid across the wet concrete like slow-moving flames. Through the glass doors, the glow pulsed over faces in the waiting room, turning curious heads toward the commotion. Inside the ER, Nolan Pierce was already building a case, the way he built everything else, with volume, certainty, and a story where he never looked weak. He paced in front of the nurse's station with his hands empty and his voice full. "She shoved my resident," he said loud enough for half the hallway to hear. "She threatened security. She performed an invasive procedure without authorization. Do you understand what that means for this hospital?" Maria clutched the phone at her desk like it might bite her. Jess stood near the crash cart, still holding a bag she had not set down since the elevator doors closed on Claire. Her eyes kept drifting to the blood on the instrument tray, then away again, like looking too long might summon it back. Dr. Malik Carter hovered by Trauma 1's doorway, his scrubs smeared and his face drained. He looked like someone who had stepped out of a different life and could not figure out how to return. Pierce pointed at him. Tell them, she assaulted you." Carter blinked. "She moved me out of the way." Pierce's mouth tightened. "That is assault." Carter swallowed. "She saved him." Pierce's head snapped toward him, eyes sharp. "You do not know that. You do not know anything. You are a resident. You are here to follow orders." Carter looked down, jaw working, trapped between truth and hierarchy. The double doors opened, and 2 officers walked in, rainwater darkening their shoulders. They were not swaggering. They were cautious, scanning the ER the way people scan a room that might turn into something worse. The older one, Deputy Simon Reeves, wore his authority like a weight. His partner, Deputy Lena Ortega, looked younger, sharper, her eyes quick. Pierce surged forward, relief flashing across his face. Not relief that help had arrived for a crisis, relief that a weapon had arrived for his narrative. "Officers." Pierce began speaking fast. "Thank God. I am Dr. Nolan Pierce. I need you to arrest a nurse immediately. She is dangerous. She attacked staff and performed a surgical procedure on a patient." Deputy Reeves held up a hand. "Slow down, doctor. Who is the nurse?" Pierce stabbed a finger toward the hall. "Claire Morgan. She is in ICU right now, or wherever she ran off to." Jess's voice came out small. She did not run. Pierce turned on her. "Do not undermine me." Deputy Ortega looked from Pierce to Jess. "Ma'am, were you present?" Jess nodded, throat tight. "Yes." Reeves made a note. "We will talk to you in a minute. First, we need to secure the situation. Where's the nurse now?" Pierce's chest rose with indignation. "I told you ICU." She moved the patient while keeping her hands inside the chest cavity. It was grotesque. "I am telling you she is unstable." Ortega's eyes narrowed at the exaggeration, not offended, just measuring. "What is the patient's status?" Pierce hesitated just a fraction. His answer would either strengthen him or crack him. "He is critical," Pierce said, choosing words carefully. "He is a Marine. Massive trauma. He will likely die. Even if he lives, what she did was reckless. We have protocols. We have standards." Reeves nodded slowly. "All right. We need hospital administration. And we need to speak with this nurse." Pierce's shoulders straightened. "I will cooperate fully. I want charges. Practicing medicine without a license, assault, whatever applies." Jess heard herself speak before she could stop it. "If you arrest her, you should also ask why the code failed before she stepped in." Pierce's head whipped around. "Jess." Ortega looked directly at Jess now. "Why do you say it failed?" Jess felt every eye on her. Her face burned, but her hands remembered the flatline the moment the room surrendered the way Claire's voice had cut through it like a blade. "Because he had no pulse," Jess said. "Because Dr. Pierce was calling time. Because if she had not acted, he would be dead." Pierce laughed once sharp and joyless. "Listen to yourself. You are romanticizing a crime." Deputy Reeves glanced down the hall toward ICU, as if weighing how to proceed without turning a hospital into a circus. "We will speak with her. Where is security?" One of the security guards stepped forward reluctantly. A tall man named Grant, whose hands looked too gentle for his size. "We are here, sir." Reeves nodded. "Walk us up." Pierce moved to join them, then stopped when Reeves's eyes held him. "No," Dr. Reeves said. "Stay here. We will get your statement after." Pierce opened his mouth, then closed it. He forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Of course." As the officers headed toward the elevators with security, Pierce turned back to the nurse's station and leaned over Maria's desk. "Get legal," he hissed. "Get the administrator. I want this documented right now. I want her badge pulled. I want everything." Maria's hands shook as she dialed. Jess stood still, heart thudding, mind replaying the moment Claire's hands disappeared into the wound, and the heart answered. It had felt impossible. It had felt like watching a door open into a world Jess did not know existed. Upstairs, ICU was dimmer, quieter built to pretend that chaos could be contained behind glass and rules. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and warm plastic like machines breathing for people who could not. Claire stood at the sink outside the unit, scrubbing her hands until the skin turned raw and pink. Blood had dried in the creases of her knuckles before she got it all off. Her eyes stayed on the running water not because she was fascinated by it, but because she was controlling her breath. In a nearby room, Ethan Hale's monitor sang its steady, hard-won rhythm. Numbers rose and fell. A ventilator hissed softly. The unit nurse spoke in calm phrases, adjusting drips, checking dressings. Claire did not go into the room yet. She stood outside the glass watching the line on the monitor the way people watch a campfire after a storm, waiting to be sure it would not go out. She heard the elevator doors open behind her. Footsteps. 2 sets measured official. Deputy Reeves stopped a few feet away, leaving space the way you leave space around something unpredictable. "Ma'am," he said. "Claire Morgan." Claire turned slowly. Her posture was upright but not defensive. Her eyes were tired and steady, the eyes of someone who had finished doing the impossible and had not yet had time to feel anything about it. "Yes," she said. Reeves nodded toward her hands red from scrubbing. "We need to speak with you. There are allegations that you assaulted staff and performed a procedure you were not authorized to perform." Claire's gaze did not flicker. "Is the patient alive?" Ortega answered, voice firm. "We were told he has a pulse." Claire looked back at Ethan's room for a beat. "Then the allegation is that I acted." Reeves's mouth tightened. "There is more to it than that." Claire did not argue. "I will answer questions." Ortega stepped closer, eyes sharp. "Do you have a medical license?" Claire's face did not change, but something behind her eyes moved like a door, closing gently. "I have training," Claire said. Ortega's brows drew together. "That is not an answer." Claire met her gaze. "It is the only one that matters to a man who was dying." Reeves exchanged a glance with Ortega, then lifted his hand slightly toward his belt. Not threatening, procedural. We are going to escort you downstairs. Claire nodded once. I am not resisting. Ortega hesitated, then asked almost reluctantly, why were you scrubbing like that? Claire looked at her hands. Because blood stays with you. Reeves motioned. Let's go. Claire took one last look at Ethan's monitor, then turned and walked with them, calm, steady, not running, not pleading. Downstairs, the ER had changed shape. The night shift had become a stage crowded with people who did not belong there. The hospital administrator, Thomas Caldwell, stood near the nurse's station in a suit that looked too expensive for fluorescent lights. Sweat darkened his collar. His eyes darted between Pierce and the police and the staff, calculating liability like a man counting the cost of a fire while the building still burned. Beside him was the hospital's legal counsel, a woman named Deborah Lane, with hair pulled tight and a tablet already open. Her face was composed, but her fingers tapped faster than calm. Pierce stepped closer to them as if seeking shelter. There, Pierce said, pointing toward the elevator as it opened. That is her. Claire stepped out, flanked by the deputies and security. Her scrubs were darker from the waist down, stained, but her face was clean, except for a faint smear near her jawline she had missed. She looked exhausted, not wild. Caldwell flinched at the sight of her, and then recovered, forcing a professional smile that did not belong in the room. Miss Morgan, he said. I am Thomas Caldwell, hospital administrator. There has been an incident. We need to understand exactly what happened. Pierce pushed forward, voice rising. She butchered a patient. She endangered staff. She practiced medicine without a license. She should be in cuffs. Jess watched Claire's face for any sign of fear. There was none. There was only a quiet resignation, like a person who knew the bill always came due. Deputy Reeves cleared his throat. We are investigating. We need statements. We also need to speak to the attending surgeon for the hospital. Someone with authority to assess what occurred medically. Caldwell nodded quickly. I've already paged Dr. Walter Keene. Pierce's shoulders loosened with relief. Good. Dr. Keene will confirm how insane this was. The elevator dinged again. The doors slid open and a man stepped out who did not need an introduction. Walter Keene was in his late 50s with silver hair and a face lined by long nights. He wore surgical scrubs under a half-fastened gown, as if he had pulled it off mid-stride. His eyes were sharp, not cruel, just tired of nonsense. He looked around. The ER took in the blood on the floor, the police, Pierce's flushed face, Claire's stained scrubs, Jess's pale expression. Keene's gaze landed on Claire and held. For a long second the room went quiet. Pierce rushed forward, eager. Dr. Keene, thank God you are here. I tried to stop her. She assaulted my resident and performed an emergency thoracotomy in the trauma bay. She has no authority. We need her arrested and terminated immediately. Keene did not look at Pierce while he spoke. He kept his eyes on Claire like he was reading a language other people could not. What is the patient's status? Keene asked. Pierce blinked, irritated that Keene was not validating him fast enough. He is critical. Keene's voice remained flat. That is not a status. Caldwell stepped in quickly. Dr. Keene, the patient is in ICU. We need to know if the intervention was medically justified. Keene looked at Caldwell as if Caldwell were a man asking whether gravity was optional. I just came from ICU, Keene said. Jess's heart jumped. Pierce's mouth opened, then shut. Keene turned slightly so the room could hear him. Staff Sergeant Ethan Hale is critical, Keene said, but stable. He has a sustained rhythm. He is perfusing. The ICU team is managing him. The word stable landed like a dropped instrument. Pierce's face drained. Jess felt her knees go weak with the relief she had not let herself feel until now. Caldwell exhaled loudly, as if he had been holding his breath since the ambulance arrived. Pierce recovered first because he always did. He grabbed the word stable and tried to twist it. Stable now does not erase what she did. Pierce snapped. He may still die. She cut him open like a lunatic. Keen's eyes finally shifted to Pierce. The look was not dramatic. It was simply the look of a man who had watched too many people talk past reality. "You used the word lunatic," Keen said. "Tell me what you did when he arrested." Pierce stiffened. "I followed protocol. We initiated ACLS. We prepared to decompress a hemothorax." Keen nodded once slowly. "And did you consider tamponade?" Pierce's jaw tightened. He had penetrating trauma. "Hemothorax is common." Keen's voice sharpened just a degree. "That is not an answer." Pierce swallowed. "We were in the process of placing a chest tube." Keen looked at Claire again. "And you," he said quietly. "What did you see?" Claire's eyes did not move from his. "I saw distended neck veins, muffled sounds, narrow pressure. His chest did not rise evenly. He was being squeezed." Silence. Keen's mouth twitched, not a smile in acknowledgement. "You opened in the correct space," Keen said, speaking to the room now. "You avoided major vessels. You relieved pressure without shredding tissue. The work I saw in ICU, the stabilization, the control that was not guessing." Pierce's voice rose frantic. "She is a nurse!" Keen's head turned, and the snap in his eyes stopped Pierce mid-breath. "Then, explain." Keen said how a nurse performed a procedure with cleaner hands than the physician who claims he had it under control. Caldwell's face tightened. Deborah Lane's fingers stopped tapping for the first time. Deputy Ortega looked at Reeves, her expression shifting from suspicion to something more complicated. Pierce's voice turned harsh, desperate. "You cannot defend this. The board will destroy us." Keen's voice was low. "The board will destroy whoever deserves it." Caldwell cleared his throat, forcing himself back into control. "We are not doing this in the open ER," he said. "We are going upstairs. Conference room, now." Deborah Lane nodded. "Yes, we need a closed environment." Deputy Reeves stepped forward. "Miss Morgan will remain present. She is not free to leave." Claire nodded once, as if she had expected nothing else. As they moved toward the elevator, the staff parted. Some stared at Claire like she was dangerous. Others stared like she was impossible. Jess kept her eyes on Claire's shoulders as if trying to memorize the way she carried herself now that the mask had cracked. In the elevator, Pierce stood rigid, jaw clenched, breathing shallow. He smelled like adrenaline and wounded pride. Claire stood opposite him, hands clasped loosely, face unreadable. Pierce could not help himself. He leaned toward Keen, voice low. "She threatened my authority. You saw that." Keen did not look at him. "Authority is not a shield. It is a responsibility." Pierce scoffed softly. "You are making this about ego." Keen's eyes shifted toward him. "You already did." The elevator opened. On the administrative floor, carpeted and quiet, the air different from the ER. No alarms. No blood. Just framed photographs of smiling donors and plaques that claimed excellence. The conference room was long and cold, dominated by a polished table that reflected overhead lights like a shallow pool. Caldwell sat at the far end as if he needed distance. Deborah Lane placed her tablet down and opened a legal pad. Reeves and Ortega stood near the door, not relaxed. Security lingered behind them, uncertain where they belonged. Pierce took a seat across from Claire, as if distance could restore his control. He adjusted his posture, smoothing his hair, trying to look like a man in charge, rather than a man who had almost lost a patient. Claire sat at the head of the table without intending to. Or maybe she did intend to. It happened naturally, like the room arranged itself around her. Caldwell cleared his throat again. "This is a formal review of a critical incident," he said, voice trembling despite his effort. "We need to establish facts. Dr. Pierce, begin." Pierce launched into his version with practiced fluency. He described arriving at Trauma 1. He described orders given. He described Claire as disruptive, unstable, insubordinate. He called her actions barbaric. He repeated the word liability as if it were a heartbeat. Deborah Lane typed quickly, eyes never leaving her screen. Caldwell nodded at points like he was watching a pitch. When Pierce finished, he leaned back satisfied, waiting for the room to validate him. Keene spoke next. He did not perform, he stated. He described the patient's injuries as he had seen them. He described the presence of tamponade. He described the necessary urgency. He described Claire's work in the ICU with the kind of precise praise that sounded like a surgeon evaluating a stitch line, not a man handing out compliments. Deborah Lane's typing slowed. Caldwell's mouth tightened. Pierce's face reddened. "You cannot know she did it correctly," he snapped. "You did not witness it." Keene's eyes were steady. "I can see the result. The body tells the truth." Caldwell looked to Claire as if remembering she was the center of the storm. "Miss Morgan," he said carefully, "do you understand what you are accused of?" Claire's voice was quiet. "I understand what I did." Deborah Lane finally looked up. "You understand you may have committed a felony." Claire met her gaze. "I understand a man was dead until he was not." Reeves shifted his weight. "Ma'am," he said, "we need clarity. Do you have a license to practice medicine in the state of Georgia?" Claire's eyes flicked to the tabletop, then back up. "Not under this name." The words hung in the air like smoke. Pierce sat forward hungry. "There, you hear that? Arrest her." Ortega's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, not under this name?" Claire did not answer right away. She looked tired now in a deeper way, like fatigue reached into her bones. Before she could speak, the conference room door opened. Not a polite knock, just the door swinging inward with the confidence of someone who did not ask permission in buildings like this. 4 men entered in dark suits that looked almost identical. They moved in a way that did not match hospital corridors. Their steps were quiet. Their eyes were sharp. Their hands stayed visible, but their posture suggested they had never been unarmed in their lives. The first man was tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cut hair and a faint scar cutting through his eyebrow. He held a thick file in one hand as if it weighed nothing. Caldwell stood quickly. "Excuse me, this is a hospital matter. You cannot just walk in here." The tall man did not look at Caldwell. He placed the file on the table in front of Claire with a soft thud that sounded final. Then he spoke, voice low and controlled. "You were supposed to stay invisible," he said. His eyes stayed on Claire. "Colonel." Pierce let out a short laugh, loud and disbelieving. "Colonel? She is a nurse." The tall man's gaze slid to Pierce with an indifference colder than anger. It was the look you give a fly that keeps landing on your food. He turned the file toward Caldwell and Deborah Lane, just enough for them to see the seal on the paperwork. United States Department of Defense. Deborah Lane's fingers froze above her keyboard. Caldwell swallowed so hard his throat bobbed. Deputy Reeves straightened, suddenly aware that the room had changed jurisdictions without warning. The man in the suit returned his attention to Claire. "Travis Holt," he said, as if the name should be enough. "You made a mess." Claire's expression did not shift. A Marine needed help. Holt's jaw tightened, not in disagreement and frustration that sounded personal. "You were not supposed to be here." Pierce pushed his chair back with a sharp scrape. "This is insane. You cannot claim federal authority in my hospital. This is a criminal case." Holt did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Dr. Pierce Holt said, "Sit down." Pierce hesitated, shocked by the command, then sat as if his body obeyed before his ego caught up. Holt opened the file and slid a card across the table. It was a military identification card, worn at the edges, the photo scuffed. The face on it was younger, and harder eyes flat under dust hair pulled back tight. Still unmistakable. The name read Rachel Maddox, rank Lieutenant Colonel, designation trauma surgeon. Unit identifiers Pierce would not understand. Claire did not touch the card. Pierce did. He picked it up with fingers that trembled. His lips moved as he read. His face drained again, color spilling away until only shock remained. "This is fake," Pierce whispered, but it sounded like prayer, not argument. Keene leaned forward slightly, eyes on the card, then on Claire. There was recognition there and something else, something like pity. Holt's voice filled the room with quiet authority. Her name is not Claire Morgan. That is an alias. She is not a nurse. She is a retired lieutenant colonel trauma surgeon attached to Special Operations Medical Detachments. She has worked forward, austere, and under fire. Caldwell sat down slowly, as if his legs no longer trusted him. Deborah Lane's face had gone still the way lawyers look when a case becomes something that can swallow them whole. Deputy Ortega stared at Claire with a new kind of caution, not because she thought Claire might attack, but because she suddenly understood she was looking at someone trained for extreme situations. Pierce shook his head over and over, breath quickening. If she is a surgeon, why is she here? Why was she changing bedpans? Why did she let me speak to her like that? Keene answered before Claire did, voice low. Because she was hiding. And because you never bothered to see the person in front of you. Pierce snapped toward him. Do not moralize this. Keene's eyes stayed steady. It is not morality, it is observation. Holt watched Pierce for a beat, then dismissed him like a completed task. He turned back to Claire. You vanished, Holt said. 3 years. No trace, no contact. Do you know how many people in my building have been looking for you? Claire's gaze dropped to her hands. The skin was raw. The knuckles were cracked. The hands of someone who had scrubbed away more than blood. I retired, she said again, softer this time. Holt leaned in slightly. You disappeared. Silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. Caldwell cleared his throat weakly. Mr. Holt, with respect, you cannot just take a hospital employee. There are legal processes. Deborah. Lane nodded automatically, trying to regain footing. If she committed a crime, the state... Holt lifted a hand and both of them stopped. The gesture was small but total. This is not your lane, Holt said. Reeves shifted careful. Sir, we are law enforcement. We have an active investigation involving potential assault and unlawful medical practice. Are you claiming federal custody? Holt's eyes met Reeves's. I am claiming the situation is contained. Reeves's jaw tightened. Contained does not mean ignored. Claire finally spoke, voice calm. Deputy Reeves, I will not run. Reeves blinked, thrown by the directness. Ma'am, I need to know if the patient's family has been notified. Holt answered before Claire could. They have. Pierce latched on to that. Family, yes. And when the family sues, when the Marine Corps sues, when the board. Holt's gaze cut to him again. Doctor, you are going to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Pierce barked a laugh. I am not signing anything. I am the attending physician. This is my case. Holt's voice remained level. As far as the public is concerned, Dr. Keene took over the case and performed the definitive intervention. Your name will be nowhere near this. Pierce's eyes widened. You cannot erase me. Keene's voice was quiet, heavy. They can. Pierce's face contorted anger, fighting panic. This is outrageous. She violated every protocol. She endangered everyone. Claire looked at him, then really looked at him, and Pierce flinched at the calm in her eyes. Protocols are for living patients, Claire said, and for people who have time to be careful. Pierce slammed a hand on the table. You do not get to lecture me. Keene leaned back, voice low. She does not have to lecture you. You already lived the lesson. Deborah Lane swallowed, trying to catch up to a world moving too fast. Mr. Holt, if your organization is going to assume control, we need documentation. We need justification. Holt slid another page across the table. It was stamped with language that made Deborah's eyes widen. Her hand trembled slightly as she read. Caldwell looked over her shoulder and went pale. Reeves watched them, then looked back at Holt. And the patient. Ethan Hale. What is he exactly that the Department of Defense is in my hospital conference room? Holt's eyes stayed on Claire, but his words were for the room. He is not a random motor vehicle accident victim, Holt said. His identity matters. Claire's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. Keene noticed. Jess was not in the room, but her absence was felt by Claire like a missing heartbeat. Downstairs, Jess was pacing the ICU waiting area with her phone in her hand, watching the newsfeed refresh with nothing but weather updates and local traffic as if the world outside had no idea what had happened inside those walls. In the conference room, Holt's voice remained steady. "He is the son of General Raymond Hale Holt," said. The name struck the air like a hard object thrown. Caldwell's mouth fell open. Deborah Lane's eyes flashed with sudden understanding of the scale of disaster and the scale of protection that would follow. Deputy Ortega exhaled sharply, eyes widening. Pierce went still, then laughed, once thin and disbelieving. "You are lying." Keene did not move. His eyes stayed on Claire now, not on Holt, as if the most important part of that sentence was not the general but Claire's reaction. Claire's face had gone quiet in a different way, not blank, controlled. Her breathing slowed as if she were forcing her body not to react. Holt watched her closely. He is here on orders. He is important. He is protected. That protection failed on the road tonight. Reeves frowned. Failed. What does that mean? Holt's gaze flicked to Reeves, then back to Claire. It means the military is paying attention, and it means your hospital is now a point of interest. Caldwell's voice came out strained. "This is a community hospital. We are not equipped for this." Keene's eyes remained steady. "You were not equipped for the trauma either. And yet it arrived." Pierce's hands trembled on the tabletop. "So what, you sweep this under the rug, you pretend she did not do it, you threaten me into silence." Holt's voice stayed flat. "Yes." Pierce's eyes flashed. "I will go to the press." Keene's gaze sharpened. "You will not." Pierce looked to Caldwell, desperate for someone to support him. Caldwell could not. He looked to Deborah Lane. Deborah Lane's face had the careful stillness of someone who knew when a fight would ruin them. Holt placed a pen in front of Pierce, a sign. Pierce stared at it like it was poison. Claire watched him, expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice was low and controlled. "You almost killed him," she said. Pierce's head snapped up. "How dare you?" Claire held his gaze. "You were treating the room, not the patient. You wanted to be right. He needed you to be effective." Pierce's jaw clenched. "You are not my judge." Claire's eyes did not soften. No, his physiology was. Holt leaned back, satisfied that the room had understood who was in charge. "Colonel Maddox," he said. "You are coming with us." Claire's eyes lifted. "Am I under arrest?" Holt's tone did not change. "No, but you cannot stay here." Deputy Reeves stepped forward slightly. "Sir, with respect, if she has admitted she does not have a license under the name Claire Morgan, the state has a case." Holt's gaze stayed on Reeves. "Deputy, you can file whatever you like. It will be held at the appropriate level. For now, you will stand down." Reeves's jaw tightened. Ortega touched his arm lightly, a subtle signal to pause to assess the room they were in, the kind of room where local authority became very small. Claire looked at Keene. For the first time, there was a crack in her control, a hint of exhaustion that made her look human rather than weapon-sharp. Keene's voice was quiet. "Why were you here?" Claire's eyes dropped to her hands again. "I wanted quiet." Keene nodded as if he understood more than she said. Caldwell cleared his throat, voice weak. "We need to know what to tell the staff, the police, the board." Holt's gaze remained cool. "Tell them the patient is alive. Tell them the hospital responded appropriately. Tell them nothing else." Pierce's lips pulled back in a grimace. "You think you can control the story." Holt did not answer. Claire stood up slowly. Her chair scraped softly against the polished floor. The sound felt too loud in the sterile room. She looked to Reeves and Ortega. "I will answer your questions," she said. "But not here." Reeves hesitated, then nodded once. "We will coordinate." Claire turned toward the door. Holt's team moved with her, not gripping her arms, just positioning themselves as if guarding someone valuable. Before she left, Claire looked back at Pierce. Her voice was calm, almost clinical. "When you hear muffled heart sounds and see neck veins like ropes," she said, "do not wait for permission to think." Pierce's face hardened, but he said nothing. Keene watched Claire go, his eyes following her as if he could see the weight she carried even when she walked like it did not exist. As the conference room door closed, the hum of the building returned faint and steady, like the hospital trying to pretend this was still just another rainy night in Savannah. The administrative floor tried to pretend it was above the mess. The carpet was clean. The framed donor photos smiled. The air smelled like lemon polish and quiet money. But the moment Claire Morgan walked out of that conference room with Travis Holt and his men drifting around her like a moving perimeter, the illusion broke. The hospital did not feel like a hospital anymore. It felt like a place that had been discovered. They did not cuff her. They did not touch her. They simply guided her down a back corridor and into a small office that had once belonged to someone who handled patient complaints. The desk held a neat stack of brochures about satisfaction surveys and billing disputes. A fake plant leaned toward the window. The room was too normal, which made it wrong. Claire stood in the center of it and listened to her own breathing settle. The adrenaline had burned off, leaving a deep ache behind her eyes. Her hands were clean now, but the memory of blood still lived in the seams of her skin. Holt closed the door and faced her. His suit jacket was unwrinkled, his tie perfect, as if he had not just walked into a civilian hospital and rewritten everyone's reality. "You made it loud," he said. Claire looked at him without apology. He was dying. Holt's jaw flexed. "I know. I was briefed on the medical timeline. I also know you chose to live under a name that is not yours, inside a place with cameras on every corner and badge scans at every door." Claire's eyes drifted to the window. Outside, rain streaked the glass like scratches. "I chose a place where nothing mattered," she said. Holt gave a humorless exhale. "Nothing matters until it does." A second man from Holt's team stood near the door, silent hands clasped in front of him. He looked like the kind of person who could wait for hours without moving. Holt pulled a phone from his pocket and checked it. "General Hale has been notified," he said. "He is airborne." Claire's shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. The name sat in her chest like a weight she had carried a long time and told herself she had put down. Holt watched her reaction. "You thought the past would stay where you left it." Claire did not answer. She sat down slowly on the edge of the desk chair, not because she needed rest, but because standing felt like a decision she could not afford to make too soon. Downstairs, the emergency department boiled. Nolan Pierce had not calmed down. He had sharpened. In his mind, the arrival of Holt and the military identification did not absolve Claire. It insulted him. He walked the length of the ER corridor like a man rehearsing his testimony, speaking to anyone who would listen. "They are intimidating witnesses," he told Deborah Lane, as she tried to keep Caldwell from hyperventilating. "This is coercion. This is federal overreach. This is going to destroy our accreditation. We need to protect ourselves." Deborah's face stayed composed, but her eyes kept flicking toward the elevator as if expecting more suits to appear out of thin air. Caldwell's voice came out strained. "Nolan, stop. Just stop talking." Pierce leaned closer. "Do you understand what she did to me?" Caldwell stared at him. "Do you understand what she did to your patient?" Pierce's nostrils flared. "That is not the point." Deborah's fingers gripped her tablet tighter. "The point is, we are now dealing with a federal presence and a Marine Corps family. Your point is going to need to wait." Pierce's mouth twisted. He looked down the hall past nurses and techs who refused to meet his eyes. He felt it, the shift in the air, the way the room no longer believed him. He could handle disagreement. He could not handle irrelevance. He walked toward the ambulance bay exit and pulled his phone out. His thumb moved fast, tapping numbers and sending messages. He did not call his father. He did not call the board. He called someone who could give him a microphone. Upstairs, Jess Park stood outside the ICU doors with her hands still shaking. She had been kept out of the conference room, pushed aside by uniforms and suits and administrators who suddenly found their voices. But she could not push the memory aside. She kept seeing Claire's eyes when the monitor flatlined. Not panic, not fury. Focus. A nurse at the ICU desk. Daniel Ruiz glanced up at Jess. "You have been pacing for 20 minutes, he said. Jess swallowed. "I cannot sit." Daniel's eyes softened. "Your patient is stable for now. Dr. Keene is inside. Whoever did that intervention did not do it to lose him upstairs." Jess looked at him sharply. "Whoever did it?" Daniel shrugged gently. "Rumors travel faster than gurneys." Jess stared through the glass at the ICU hallway where machines hummed and staff moved with quiet urgency. "She was just a nurse," Jess whispered. Daniel's brows lifted. Was she? Jess opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth sounded too strange to say out loud. In the small office upstairs, Holt's phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen and his face tightened. He turned the phone toward the silent man near the door. "Pull it up." The man stepped forward, tapped, then held the screen out to Holt. Holt's eyes narrowed. He turned the phone toward Claire. On the screen was shaky video vertical filmed from too far away. It showed Trauma 1 through partially open doors. It caught Pierce's frantic motions, the crowding staff, the flatline. Then it caught Claire's blur as she stepped in. It caught her hands moving with a speed that made the frame stutter. It caught blood. It caught shock. It did not need sound to be loud. Claire stared at it. Her face did not change, but something in her chest went cold. "How?" she asked. Holt's voice was clipped. "A patient in the waiting room. Teenager with a wrist injury. Filmed through the gap. It is already posted." Claire's gaze lifted to his. "Taken down." Holt shook his head once. "We are trying." He tapped his screen and scrolled. The same video appeared again and again, mirrored on different accounts, reposted with captions that twisted the moment into whatever story people wanted to tell. Holt's jaw tightened. "It is moving like wildfire. We can remove 1 copy and 5 more appear." Claire's voice stayed quiet. "So now the world sees." Holt did not deny it. "Now the world guesses." Outside, before dawn, the first news vans rolled in. Their headlights cut across wet pavement. People with rain jackets and umbrellas clustered at the hospital entrance. Camera tripods snapped open. Microphones were tested. The word nurse traveled from mouth to mouth like a spell. Inside the administration suite, a wall-mounted television flickered to life. Caldwell had turned it on because he could not bear not knowing what was being said about his hospital. A news anchor's face filled the screen. The lower caption read, "Medical Miracle or Malpractice at Savannah Hospital." Deborah Lane stood with her arms crossed and her lips pressed tight, watching the crawl of headlines, listening to the tone shift from curiosity to judgment. Then the camera cut to a familiar face. Nolan Pierce sat in a studio chair, hair-dry shirt, clean posture, practiced. He had slipped out of the hospital and into a story where he was still the center. His voice on television was controlled, concerned, almost gentle. The kind of voice that made people believe him before he finished a sentence. "It was a terrifying situation," Pierce said. "We had a critically injured Marine. We were executing standard life-saving protocols. Then Nurse Morgan became hysterical. She physically assaulted my resident. She threatened staff, and she performed an extreme procedure she is not qualified to do. It is a miracle the patient survived her actions." In the small office upstairs, Claire watched the broadcast on Holt's phone with the same calm detachment she used when she read a monitor. She did not look shocked. She looked as if she had expected it. "He believes it," she murmured. Holt's eyes stayed on the screen. "He believes he can win if he speaks first." Claire's gaze drifted away. "He wants to bury what he did." Holt's voice turned hard. "He wants to bury you." Downstairs, Jess watched the same interview on her own phone, standing in the ICU hallway with her back against the wall. Her stomach twisted as Pierce painted Claire as a monster. Daniel glanced at Jess. "That is your attending." Jess's voice came out raw. "That is a liar." Daniel hesitated. "Careful." Jess shook her head slowly. "No, not careful. Not anymore." In the administration suite, Caldwell turned to Deborah Lane, panic rising. "If he keeps talking, our board will demand action. The public will demand action. The district attorney will demand action." Deborah's eyes stayed on the television. The public is not a jury, she said, but they will act like one. Caldwell swallowed. And her name, Claire Morgan. If that is not her name, what do we say? Deborah's fingers tapped the tablet again. We say nothing. We wait for Holt's people to tell us what we are allowed to say. Caldwell's laugh came out thin, aloud. Deborah did not smile. This is not a normal hospital incident anymore. In the small office upstairs, Holt turned away from the video and looked at Claire. His voice lowered. There is another problem, he said. Claire's eyes lifted. Say it. Holt's gaze flicked toward the window toward the hospital entrance where lights were multiplying. Your face is on camera, your hands, your posture. People who know what they are looking at will recognize you. Claire's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the chair. That problem existed the moment I picked up the scalpel. Holt studied her. You knew. Claire's voice was flat. I accepted it. Holt's phone buzzed again. He checked it, then his expression shifted. We have a line on the original upload, he said. We are trying to trace it. We are trying to keep reporters out of the building. We are trying to keep local police calm. We are trying to keep Pierce quiet. Claire stood up. The movement was unhurried, but decisive. You are trying to manage noise, she said. Holt's jaw tightened. Yes. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. Noise is not what is wrong. Holt paused. What do you mean? Claire's gaze drifted to nothing in particular, as if she were looking through walls and time. The crash, she said quietly. The way the metal entered the cabin. The way he was pinned. Holt's expression held. It was a multi-vehicle collision. Claire shook her head once. Ethan Hale is a Marine. He drove military vehicles in places where mistakes kill you. He does not lose control in light rain. Not like that. Holt stared at her. You do not know that. Claire looked at him. I know what skill looks like. I know what panic looks like. And I know what setup looks like. The silent man by the door shifted, just slightly alert now. Holt hesitated for a fraction of a second, then pulled his phone up and dialed. He spoke in short-coded phrases. His eyes remained on Claire's face as if he were watching her predict the weather. He listened. His face went still. He ended the call and looked at her. Highway Patrol just finished preliminary inspection, Holt said. Claire waited. Holt swallowed. Brake lines were cut. Steering column tampered. It was not an accident. The room seemed to drop a few degrees. Claire's breath went slow and controlled. Her eyes did not widen. She did not gasp. The knowledge settled into her like a familiar weight. Then they did not fail, she said. They adjusted. Holt stared at her. They tried to kill him. Claire nodded once. They still will. Holt's voice lowered. We have local police downstairs. We have hospital security. We have my team. General Hale is inbound with Marines. Claire's eyes sharpened. That is not enough. Not inside a building this crowded. Holt frowned. You think they will come here? Claire's gaze moved to the door, as if she could already hear footsteps. If Ethan Hale is the target, the hospital is the choke point. He cannot run, he cannot move, he cannot fight. Holt's mouth tightened. We can move him to a military facility. Claire's eyes flicked. He is not stable enough. Holt's face tightened. Dr. Keene will decide stability. Claire's voice cut controlled. Dr. Keene is a surgeon. I am telling you what the transport vibration will do to a heart that has just been repaired under pressure. Holt stared at her. He did not like being corrected, but he understood competence when it stared him down. Outside, the hospital entrance swelled with people. A cluster of supporters began yelling for the nurse. Another cluster began yelling for accountability. Reporters pushed microphones at anyone who looked like staff. Security tried to hold the line. Rain continued falling like the sky had made a decision and would not change its mind. In the crowd, a man in a dark raincoat stood still. He did not hold a camera. He did not shout. His face was forgettable in the way professionals are forgettable. His eyes were not on the crowd. They were on the doors and the guards and the pattern of movement. He watched the shift change at the entrance desk. He watched a tired security guard step away to drink coffee. He watched a police officer adjust their stance and leave a gap. He reached into his pocket and his fingers touched cold metal. He did not pull it out yet. He pulled out a small phone instead and typed a message with 2 thumbs that did not shake. Target confirmed. ICU. Surgeon on site. Proceed. In the small office upstairs, Claire felt it. Not a sound. Not a sight. A sensation at the base of her skull, a cold prickle that made her spine tighten. She turned her head slightly, listening to the building. Holt watched her. What? Claire's voice stayed quiet. Someone is inside. Holt's expression sharpened. That is a strong claim. Claire looked at him. It is not a claim. It is a pattern. She moved toward the door. Holt stepped in front of her. You are not cleared to roam, he said. Claire's eyes locked onto his. Your clearance does not keep a man alive in a hallway. Holt hesitated. It was brief. It was enough. Claire stepped past him and opened the door. The administrative corridor outside was silent. Too silent. It did not match the chaos downstairs. Claire walked not fast, not slow, the way you walk when speed is a tool you use only when it is time. Holt followed with 2 men. As they reached the elevator bank, Holt spoke into his phone voice, clipped. Lockdown ICU. Increase security. No visitors. No press. Code Silver. The words rolled down through the building's intercom system moments later, echoing across hallways and waiting rooms. Attention all staff. Code Silver. Lockdown. Down in the ICU. Daniel Ruiz stiffened at the announcement. Nurses looked up from charts. A respiratory therapist paused mid-step. Jess felt her heart slam against her ribs. Code Silver was rare. Code Silver meant weapon. It meant threat. It meant the hospital was no longer just a place where bodies failed on their own. Dr. Keene stepped out of Ethan Hale's room, pulling his gloves off. His eyes were sharp. What is happening? He demanded. A nurse shook her head. Administration says lock down. Keene's gaze hardened. Administration always says lock down. That does not tell me what is real. Jess's voice came out thin. Dr. Keene Pierce is on TV calling her a butcher. Keene's face tightened with disgust. Of course he is. The elevator doors opened, and Claire walked out onto the ICU floor. She did not look like a nurse now. She looked like a person who had stopped pretending. Her scrubs were still large, still plain, but her posture changed the way the whole floor felt. Nurses stopped talking. A guard at the end of the hallway shifted his stance. Keene's eyes met hers and held. He did not ask who she was. His face said he already knew enough. Holt stepped out behind her. We have an active threat, he said, voice low. The crash was sabotage. Keene's brows lifted slightly, the only sign of surprise. Target. Holt looked toward Ethan's room, him. Keene's jaw set. Then we keep him here and we harden this floor. Claire's eyes moved down the hallway. How many guards? A nurse answered. One posted at the stairwell, one near the elevator. Claire's voice stayed calm. Not enough. Daniel Ruiz looked up from the desk and saw Claire. Relief flickered across his face before he could stop it, as if her presence made the threat smaller. Claire, he began. Claire walked toward him and leaned in slightly. Her voice dropped. Daniel, she said, reading his badge like she had known it all along. Get under this desk. Stay there. Do not come out until someone you trust tells you to. Daniel blinked. What? Claire's gaze did not soften. Daniel obeyed without another word. He slid under the desk, heart hammering. Jess stared at Claire. What is happening? Claire's eyes stayed on the corridor. Someone is coming. Keene looked at Holt. Where is security? Holt's eyes flicked to his phone. Reinforcements are en route. Marines will be here when General Hale arrives. Claire spoke quietly. Threat does not wait for reinforcements. Holt's jaw tightened. You are unarmed. Claire's eyes lifted to him. Then you are asking me to lose. Holt hesitated. It was a fraction of a second. Then he reached under his jacket and pulled a compact sidearm from a holster. He did not offer it lightly. His face said he understood the line he was crossing. "This stays controlled," he said. Claire took it with practiced ease, checked it with movements that were fast and economical, then tucked it out of sight. Keene watched her hands. The way she handled the weapon told him more than any file ever could. Claire moved down the hallway toward Ethan's room. She did not enter. She stopped at an alcove across from it, a dim recess near an empty patient room, and watched the reflection in the glass panels. The ICU was quiet, but it was not peaceful. Machines hummed. Air vents whispered. Somewhere a monitor beeped in a steady rhythm that felt like a promise. 30 seconds passed. Then the stairwell door at the far end eased open. 2 men stepped into the hallway. They wore scrubs. They wore surgical masks. They carried bags that looked like emergency kits. But they moved wrong. Their shoulders were too set. Their feet landed with weight that did not belong to rubber shoes. Their eyes swept the ceiling corners not for oxygen outlets for cameras. Claire's breathing slowed. Her body became still. The first man headed straight toward Ethan's door. The second hung back a few steps, glancing toward the nurse station, calculating. Jess stood frozen near the desk, watching. She could feel something was wrong, but could not name it in time. Daniel, under the desk, held his breath until his vision blurred. The first man reached for the door handle. Claire stepped out of the alcove. "Stop," she said. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The second man turned first. His hand went into his bag and came out with a suppressed pistol. The hallway changed in a single instant. Hospitals were built to stop infection, not violence. The walls were thin. The doors were glass. There was nowhere to take cover if someone decided this place was a hunting ground. Claire moved. The first shot cracked, muffled but sharp. It punched a hole in the wall behind her as she shifted into the open doorway of the empty room beside the alcove. Plaster dust burst into the air. Claire fired twice down the hall. The recoil was controlled. Her rounds struck low, forcing the gunman to stumble and drop his aim. The first man near Ethan's door abandoned the handle and swung his bag forward. Something metallic flashed under a towel. Not medical equipment. Jess's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Keene's voice snapped through the hallway. "Down!" Nurses ducked behind desks. A respiratory therapist dropped to the floor and crawled backward. Claire stayed in the doorway of the empty room, using the frame as cover. She could hear her own heartbeat steady and low, as if her body had found a rhythm it remembered. She looked around the room. No patient. No furniture except an IV pole and a portable oxygen tank strapped to a cart. Her eyes landed on the fire extinguisher mounted near the door. She yanked it off the wall and pulled the pin with a quick jerk. She did not throw it like a panic move. She placed it into the hallway and shoved it forward so it slid across the floor into the center line. The gunman fired again. The round hit the extinguisher with a sharp metallic ping. Claire fired once. The extinguisher burst, releasing a thick white cloud that flooded the corridor, turning the hallway into fog. The gunman coughed. He shouted something muffled behind the mask. His silhouette wavered in the powder. Claire moved through the cloud like she belonged in it. She did not sprint. She advanced with short, controlled steps, weapon raised, eyes narrowed, reading shapes and sound. A figure shifted. Claire struck hard with the side of the pistol, a clean, decisive blow that dropped the man's balance. His shoulder hit the wall. His weapon clattered against tile. Claire kicked it away without looking for it. The second attacker, the one she had clipped earlier, tried to crawl toward Ethan's door, dragging one leg, reaching for the bag again. Claire leveled the pistol and spoke once. "Stay." Her voice was ice. The man froze. For a moment, the hallway held its breath. The white powder drifted and settled. Alarms began to wail from rooms where equipment sensed chaos. Somewhere, a monitor beeped faster in response to movement and fear. Jess lifted her head just enough to see Claire standing over 2 downed men, dust and blood on her scrubs weapon steady. Jess realized her hands had started shaking again, not from fear, now from the sheer impossibility of what she was watching. Keene stepped out from behind the desk, eyes locked on the attackers. He moved toward Claire carefully, hands visible. "Are they down?" he asked. Claire nodded once. "Yes." Holt appeared at the far end of the hallway with his men weapons-drawn eyes scanning. His face was tight with controlled rage. He stepped over the dropped bag and kicked it open with the toe of his shoe. Inside were zip ties, a second weapon, and a syringe case that held something that was not medicine. Holt's eyes flicked to Claire. "You were right." Claire did not answer. Her gaze had already shifted to the elevator. The doors dinged. Claire pivoted, pistol-raised stance widening instinctively. The elevator doors opened, and a tall man stepped out flanked by Marines in dress blues and two more men in civilian suits who moved like bodyguards. General Raymond Hale filled the hallway without raising his voice. His shoulders were broad, his face carved with hard lines, his eyes alert and cold. He took in the scene in one sweep. Shattered glass. Powder on the floor. Two men down. A woman in blood-stained scrubs holding a pistol like it was an extension of her hand. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the general's gaze locked on Claire's face, and something subtle shifted. Not softness. Recognition. The way a man reacts when a ghost stops being a story. "At ease, Colonel Maddox," he said. Claire did not lower the weapon immediately. She checked the corners of the hallway, the stairwell, the far doors, then lowered the muzzle and clicked the safety with a movement so small most people would not notice. "General," she said. His eyes flicked past her to the door of Ethan's room. Behind it, machines breathed for his son, and a monitor kept counting time in green lines. Claire's voice stayed steady. "Your son is secure." General Hale stepped forward, boots crunching softly on the powder. He looked down at one of the attackers as if he were trash left on a floor. He looked back at Claire. "They told me you were gone," he said quietly. Claire's jaw tightened. "I tried to be." The general's gaze held hers heavy with years that had never been spoken aloud. Around them, Marines moved with terrifying efficiency, sealing doors, pushing staff back, taking control of the corridor as if the hospital were now a perimeter. Holt stepped in beside the general. "Sir, we have confirmation this was an assassination attempt tied to the crash." General Hale's face hardened further if that was possible. "Names," he said. Holt nodded once. "We will get them." The general turned his head slightly, eyes still on Ethan's door. He placed a hand on the frame for a moment, not opening it yet, as if grounding himself before he stepped into the one room in the building that mattered more than power. Claire stood beside him, quiet dust on her face, blood on her sleeves, the weight of a weapon still familiar in her hand. The monitor inside Ethan's room beeped steadily, indifferent to rank, indifferent to scandal, indifferent to the storm gathering outside the hospital's glass doors. The hallway did not feel like a hallway anymore. It felt like a checkpoint. Marines moved past nurses and respiratory techs with quiet purpose boots soft on tile-dusted white from the extinguisher cloud. One of them taped off the stairwell door. Another positioned himself at the elevator bank with his back straight and his eyes fixed forward. Holt's men swept the corridor in short, efficient arcs, checking corners, checking doors, checking the bags the attackers had carried in like they belonged. Jess stayed crouched behind the ICU desk, one hand covering her mouth, the other braced on the floor as if the building might tilt. Daniel Ruiz remained under the desk where Claire had put him, breathing shallow and fast, trying not to make sound. Dr. Keene stood near Ethan Hale's door, shoulders squared, face set. He watched the general take in the wreckage with the calm of a man used to seeing violence, but never used to seeing it this close to his son. General Hale did not step over the attackers. He walked around them like they were spilled trash, not worth the risk of a careless boot. He stopped in front of the glass, staring through it at the dim room where machines kept his son alive. For a moment, his posture shifted a fraction of a degree. It was not weakness. It was the only kind of stillness grief allowed. Claire remained a step behind him, pistol down, safety on. The white powder clung to her sleeves and hairline. A smear of blood had reappeared at her wrist where her skin had cracked from scrubbing and reopened under stress. Holt moved beside the general. "Sir," he said quietly, "we need you off this floor until it is secure." General Hale did not look away from the room. "Secure it," he said. "Yes, sir." Keene cleared his throat. "General Ethan is sedated. He is stable, but he is fragile. His chest is packed and dressed. We minimized movement. We have him on the best support we can provide here." General Hale's eyes remained on the bed. How long before he can be moved? Keene did not pretend certainty. "If the repair holds and the bleeding stays controlled, we can discuss transport. If the repair fails, there will be no transport." Holt's jaw tightened. "Madigan is ready to receive. The team is staged." Claire spoke without raising her voice. "He does not move until his physiology says he can." Holt glanced at her, then back to the general. "Sir." General Hale finally turned his head. His gaze passed over Keene, Holt, the downed attackers, then settled on Claire. His eyes were not soft, but there was something in them that made the air heavy. "You are still fast," he said. Claire's expression did not change. They were slow. A corner of the general's mouth moved not quite a smile. "I'm told you disappeared." Claire's grip on the pistol shifted slightly, not nervous, just adjusting. "I did." Keene watched them reading the history in their posture. Jess watched too, trying to understand how the quiet nurse she had followed around for months fit into this scene like she had always belonged. Deputy Reeves and Deputy Ortega stepped onto the ICU floor a moment later, faces tight. Reeves took in the Marines, the suits, the weapons, the two men on the floor, and he stopped as if the ground had changed under his feet. "This is my jurisdiction," Reeves said, voice careful but firm. "And that is a firearm in a hospital." Holt turned toward him. "Deputy, we are containing a hostile incident on federal interest." Reeves looked at the general and swallowed. "Sir." General Hale gave him a brief nod that acknowledged his existence without yielding authority. Reeves held his stance anyway. "We have 2 suspects down," Reeves said. "We have shots fired. We have civilians in the building. I need control of the scene." Holt's tone stayed even. "You will have access. You will not have control." Ortega's gaze locked on the weapons, then on the bags. She crouched near one of the attackers and saw the zip ties, the second firearm, the syringes. Her expression hardened. "Those are not medical supplies," she said. Keene's eyes narrowed. "No." Ortega looked up at Reeves. "They came to kill him." Reeves stared at Ethan's door, then at the general, then back to Holt. His jaw worked. He was deciding whether to fight a current that could pull his whole career under. "I want their identities," Reeves said. "I want a formal statement. I want chain of custody." Holt nodded once. "You will get what you need." General Hale's voice cut through the negotiation. "I want my son." Keene nodded. "You can go in, 2 minutes. No touching the lines." A Marine opened the door. General Hale stepped inside with a bodyguard at the threshold. The room swallowed him, the sound of the ventilator filling the space with a steady, mechanical breath. Through the glass, Claire saw the general move to the bedside and stand there, too big for the small room hands at his sides, as if he did not trust them to be gentle enough. He stared down at Ethan's face, and then slowly he reached out and placed 2 fingers on the back of Ethan's hand, where it rested on the blanket. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. His eyes opened to slits. Claire's chest tightened in a way she did not allow herself to acknowledge. Keene watched the monitor, ready to intervene if the spike came. It stayed steady. General Hale leaned close and spoke words too quiet to hear through glass. Ethan's gaze drifted and then slowly turned toward the doorway where Claire stood. Even through sedation, recognition sparked. Not clear, not complete, but real enough to reach for. Ethan's fingers twitched once. His lips moved around the tube, a useless effort. Claire stepped closer to the glass, not entering, not intruding, just letting him see she was there. Ethan's eyes held hers for a moment, heavy and unfocused, and then the sedation pulled him down again. His eyelids lowered. His hand relaxed. The general remained there still until Keene signaled gently that time was up. General Hale stepped back, gave one last look at his son, and walked out. When he emerged into the hallway, the air seemed to reorganize itself around him again. He looked at Holt. Report, he said. Holt held up a phone. 2 assailants likely contract. Gear indicates premeditated entry. We have the crash sabotage confirmed. We have the press outside. We have a local attending who is already trying to shape the narrative. Keene's eyes hardened. Pierce. Holt nodded. General Hale's gaze shifted down the corridor. Bring him. It took less than 3 minutes. Nolan Pierce arrived with the momentum of a man who believed he could still win if he spoke loud enough. He came flanked by Deborah Lane and 2 uniformed officers from hospital security plus a pair of local police who looked uneasy about being used as props. Pierce's hair was dry. His shirt had been changed. His face was arranged into righteous concern. He pointed as soon as he saw Claire. "There she is," Pierce said, voice echoing off glass and tile. "She brought a gun into a hospital. She assaulted staff. She turned an ICU into a war zone." Deborah Lane's eyes flicked toward the general and went wider. She opened her mouth to speak and then stopped recalculating. Pierce did not stop. "Officers," he continued, gesturing at the local police, "arrest her. I want her removed immediately. She has no license. She has no authority. She is a danger." Jess stood up slowly behind the desk, pale but steady. Daniel crawled out from under the desk and stayed low, watching. Nurses peeked from doorways, eyes wide. Keene stepped forward, voice quiet and lethal. "Dr. Pierce, this is not your floor." Pierce sneered. "It is my hospital." General Hale walked toward the Pierce. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The hallway seemed to lose oxygen as he approached. Pierce saw him and faltered, then tried to recover. "General Hale, sir, I assure you we are handling this rogue employee. We will ensure she is punished for endangering your son." General Hale stopped close enough that Pierce had to tilt his chin up to meet his eyes. "Endangering him," the general said softly. Pierce nodded quickly, eager. "Yes, sir." The so-called nurse performed a reckless procedure and then engaged in... General Hale cut him off with a single sentence. "While you were calling time of death, she restarted my son's heart." Pierce's mouth opened and closed. "Sir, with respect, that is not proven." Keene's voice slid in. "It is documented." Pierce turned on Keene, furious. "You cannot certify a crime." General Hale's eyes did not move from Pierce. "While you were worried about your reputation, she was holding his life in her hands." Pierce swallowed. "Sir, I was following protocol." General Hale's tone stayed calm. "Protocol did not stop the men who just walked into my son's ICU with zip ties and a suppressed pistol." Pierce blinked, thrown. "What?" Holt stepped forward and held up the opened crash bag they had recovered. "This is what walked in." Pierce stared at it as if it were a magic trick. "That is not related." Ortega's voice was sharp. "It is exactly related." Pierce looked around, searching for an ally. Deborah Lane avoided his eyes. The local officers shifted uneasy. Jess stared at him with a look that had lost all fear. Pierce tried again, voice rising with desperation. "You cannot let this woman roam armed. She is unstable. She is a liability." General Hale's gaze finally slid to Claire, then back to Pierce. "She is the reason my son is alive." Pierce's face reddened. "I am the attending physician. I am the one who called trauma. I am the one who—" Holt raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. He stepped forward with a tablet screen lit. "Dr. Pierce Holt said we pulled your phone logs." Pierce froze. "You cannot do that." Holt's voice remained even. "Yes, we can." Holt turned the tablet so the General Reeves and Ortega could see. The screen displayed a message with a timestamp. Pierce's eyes flicked to it and his face went gray. Holt read aloud, flat and precise. "She is here. ICU floor. Hurry." Pierce's mouth trembled. "That is not what that is." Deputy Reeves stepped forward, voice hard. "Doctor, who did you send that to?" Pierce's eyes darted. "My wife." Ortega's expression turned cold. "Unregistered number. Burner. That is not your wife." Pierce's voice cracked. "I was texting the press." Holt's eyes narrowed. "You were leaking her location to create chaos." You wanted the hospital swarmed so she would be taken before anyone asked why your code failed. Keene's voice dropped like a blade. You wanted noise to cover your incompetence. Pierce swung toward Keene, furious and panicked. You cannot prove that. General Hale spoke calm and final. I do not need to prove what you are. I only need to identify what you did. Reeves looked at Holt, then at the general, then back to Pierce. His jaw tightened with decision. Dr. Pierce Reeves said you are being detained for questioning in connection with obstruction and possible coordination with an attempted homicide. Turn around. Pierce stumbled backward. This is insane. My father is on the board. Keene's eyes flicked up. Your father called me 15 minutes ago. Pierce froze. He did. Keene's voice stayed flat. He saw the interview. He saw the footage. He is resigning. Pierce's face contorted disbelief, turning into rage. He would never. Keene held his gaze. He did. The local officers moved in. Pierce twisted, trying to pull away, voice rising into a shout that bounced off glass walls and white powder. You cannot do this. I'm a physician. You cannot treat me like a criminal. Ortega's voice cut through him. Then stop acting like one. They took his arms and started walking him toward the elevator. Pierce's eyes found Claire as he passed. He flinched, as if expecting her to strike him. Claire did not move. She watched him with a look so empty it was worse than anger. Pierce's voice broke into a final attempt to rewrite reality. You are all going to regret this. The elevator doors closed on his words. The hallway exhaled. Somewhere, a nurse started to cry quietly, not from sadness, from release. Someone else laughed, once a sharp sound that did not know how to be joy yet. Keene turned slightly, scanning the staff. Back to stations, he said. No gawking. Keep the unit steady. They moved, grateful for a command that made sense. Holt's men began photographing the attackers, bagging evidence. Marines secured the perimeter with brutal efficiency. Deputy Reeves spoke into his radio, requesting additional units, and an evidence team voice clipped and controlled. Jess stepped toward Claire cautiously, as if approaching an animal that had just survived a trap. Claire, she said. Claire's eyes shifted to her. For a moment, the hardness eased not into softness, into weariness. Jess swallowed. Are you okay? Claire stared at her hands. Powder. Blood. Raw knuckles. She flexed her fingers once. I am functional, Claire said. Jess's eyes filled. You saved him. Claire looked past Jess to Ethan's door. We bought time. Jess shook her head slowly. You keep saying it like it is nothing. Claire's gaze held Jess's for a beat. It is never nothing. Keene stepped closer, voice low. You should sit. Claire's eyes flicked to him. I am standing. Keene did not argue. Then come with me. He led her down the corridor to a small staff room near the unit, away from cameras and eyes. Holt lingered near the doorway, letting her have space without losing sight of her. Inside the room, the fluorescent light was dimmer. A stack of unused gowns sat on a shelf. A half-empty box of gloves leaned open like a mouth. There was a chair that looked too ordinary for what had just happened. Keene closed the door most of the way and leaned against the counter. He studied Claire for a long moment. How long have you been hiding under that name? Claire's jaw tightened. Long enough. Keene nodded. Your hands did not learn in Kansas. Claire's eyes stayed steady. No. Keene's voice lowered. Why Savannah? Claire's gaze drifted to the floor. Because it rains. Because nobody cares. Because the night shift is loud enough to drown thoughts. Keene's face softened slightly, as much as a man like him allowed. And when it got loud in the wrong way, Claire's voice was quiet. Then I did what I do. Keene pushed off the counter and walked to a small cabinet, pouring water into a paper cup. He offered it to her. Claire took it and drank without ceremony. The water tasted like plastic. It still helped. Keene watched her swallow and then spoke like a man choosing honesty over comfort. You cannot go back to being invisible, he said. Claire's eyes did not change. I know. The press is outside, Keene continued. They have your face. They have the footage. They will find your name, your history, your gaps. They will build a story whether we speak or not. Claire set the cup down. Let them. Keene shook his head. You say that like you have not paid the cost before. Claire's gaze flickered once a shadow behind her eyes. I have paid it. Keene held her stare. Then you know what happens next. The hospital will try to protect itself. The board will panic. Lawyers will circle. Staff will fracture into fear and loyalty. Claire's voice stayed flat. Then the hospital needs a spine. Keene's brows lifted. You offering one? Claire did not answer directly. Ethan needs care that does not stall when cameras appear. Keene's expression tightened with respect that did not feel like flattery. Yes, the door opened and General Hale stepped in, filling the small space. Holt stayed just outside a presence in the hallway. General Hale looked at Claire, then at Keene. Dr. Keene, he said thank you. Keene nodded. He is alive, sir. General Hale's gaze returned to Claire. Rachel. Claire's posture remained steady. General. He studied her face as if checking whether she was real. They told me you walked away. Claire's voice was quiet. I did. General Hale's eyes hardened, then softened a fraction. And yet, you came back the moment my son needed you. Claire's throat moved. I did not come back to the army. General Hale did not argue the wording. You came back to the work. Claire did not deny it. The general stepped closer. His voice lowered private in a room that had held too many public moments. My son is alive because of you, he said. Twice now, it seems. Claire's eyes held his. He is alive because you raised him to fight. General Hale's mouth tightened. He will fight again, but not from a hospital bed with assassins in the hallway. Holt spoke from the doorway. Sir, we have JAG on site. We also have federal agents inbound. We need to coordinate statements and custody. General Hale gave a short nod, then kept his attention on Claire. You are in trouble, he said. The surgery, the firearm discharged the identity. Claire's expression did not change. I know. General Hale's voice stayed calm. You are not going to prison. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. Do not promise what you cannot control. General Hale met her stare without flinching. I can control more than you think. Keene watched them saying nothing, letting the power dynamics settle where they belonged. General Hale continued. Ethan was not just driving home. He was carrying evidence. Claire's gaze sharpened. Evidence. The general nodded once. Against a defense contractor that believes it can buy silence with bullets. Those men came to erase what he knows. They failed. Claire's jaw tightened. They will try again. General Hale's face went granite. Then we will not give them a third chance. He looked at Keene. How long until Ethan is off this ventilator? Keene answered carefully. We will lighten sedation later. If he tolerates, we extubate. If he does not, we wait. The heart is the question. It is holding. General Hale nodded. Then we hold this building until we can move him. Holt stepped in, voice clipped. Press is escalating. We can keep them outside, but the footage is everywhere. We need a statement. General Hale looked at Keene. You speak for the hospital. Keene's eyes narrowed, and her. General Hale's gaze slid to Claire. If she wants. Claire's voice was quiet. Say the patient is alive. Say the hospital is cooperating with law enforcement. Say nothing else. Holt nodded slightly approval in his eyes. General Hale studied her. You still choose the smallest words. Claire looked down at her hands again. Words attract bullets. Keene exhaled softly. This hospital is going to attract them anyway. Claire's gaze lifted. Then the hospital needs to learn how to operate under pressure. Keene held her stare for a long second, then made a decision that felt like a door opening. We have been trying to hire a new director of trauma, he said. The board has been stalling. Ego, money, politics. Claire's expression stayed neutral. I am not interested in politics. Keene's voice was calm. Good, neither are the dying. General Hale's eyes sharpened. You want her here. Keene nodded. This city needs her. This hospital needs her, whether it admits it yet or not. Claire's gaze flicked away as if refusing to accept the shape of the offer. Keene continued. If you stay, you do not stay as a nurse. You cannot. That role is burned. You stay as what you are. Claire's throat moved. I did not come here to lead. Keene's tone stayed steady. Leadership does not ask for your permission. General Hale watched her quietly. You can run, he said. Or you can decide what happens in rooms like Trauma 1 from now on. Claire's eyes narrowed, not in anger, in calculation. The choice was not about glory. It was about control. About keeping people alive in a system that loved rules more than reality. She looked at Keene. If I stay, she said, I have conditions. Keene's mouth twitched, I assumed. Claire's voice stayed even, each sentence laid down like a line drawn in the dirt. No ego medicine, she said. No hierarchy that punishes good instincts. If a nurse says a patient is crashing, we listen. If a resident is scared, we train them, we do not humiliate them. We upgrade the trauma bay. We stop pretending this place is a quiet community hospital when the highway keeps bringing war to our doors. Keene nodded slowly, as if each word clicked into place with things he had wanted to say for years and never had the leverage to enforce. General Hale's gaze remained on her, and the Department of Defense. Claire's eyes held his. I am not going back. Holt's voice cut in careful. Colonel, you are compromised. Staying civilian in a viral incident is dangerous. Claire looked at him. So is living. Holt's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. He had seen enough to understand stubbornness could be a form of survival. Keene opened the staff room door. We need to stabilize this floor. Then we handle administration. They stepped back into the ICU corridor. The attackers had been moved. Evidence bags lined the wall. Marines stood at intersections of hallways like sentries. Nurses returned to rooms, hands still trembling but moving. The hospital was healing itself in real time, stitching routine over chaos. Jess stood by the desk, eyes red, holding a cup of water she had forgotten to drink. She looked up when Claire approached. Her voice shook. Is he going to live? Claire glanced at Ethan's monitor through the glass. The line stayed steady. The ventilator hissed softly. The room smelled like antiseptic and warmed plastic. He is alive, Claire said. That is what we have right now. Jess nodded, as if that was both comfort and instruction. Daniel Ruiz looked at Claire, voice low. You told me to stay under the desk. Claire's eyes flicked to him. Did you? Daniel swallowed. Yes. Claire nodded once. Good. Daniel's face tightened with a strange mixture of fear and gratitude. I thought I was going to die here. Claire's voice stayed quiet. You did not. Keene moved toward the elevator with General Hale, and Holt and Claire followed. Jess hesitated, then stepped forward. Claire, Jess said. Claire stopped. Jess's eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. What do I call you? The question hit in a way gunfire could not. It demanded a truth. Claire looked at her badge clipped to her scrubs. It still read, Claire Morgan, R.N. The plastic edges were scuffed, the photo slightly off-center. She stared at it for a moment, then unclipped it. Not that she said quietly. Jess swallowed. Then what? Claire held the badge loosely, as if it weighed more than it should. Rachel, she said. Jess nodded slowly, as if learning a name changed the shape of the world. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. As the elevator descended, the building's hum rose and fell around them, the sound of a hospital trying to become ordinary again. On the administrative floor, Caldwell and Deborah Lane waited like people bracing for impact. Two men in suits stood near the conference room door. JAG lawyers, now faces neutral, eyes sharp. A Marine Corps liaison held a folder. Paper moved. Phones buzzed. The air smelled like panic disguised as procedure. Caldwell began speaking before the elevator doors were fully open. General Hale Caldwell said, voice too high. We are cooperating fully. We are securing footage. We are preparing a statement. We are working with legal counsel to mitigate. General Hale stepped out and stopped him with a glance. "Your mitigation is irrelevant," the general said. "Your priority is my son and the safety of this facility." Caldwell nodded rapidly. "Of course, sir." Deborah Lane stepped forward more controlled. "General, we need clarity on custody and jurisdiction. We have local law enforcement involved. We have staff statements. We have an employee who was operating under an assumed identity." General Hale's gaze slid to Claire, then back to Deborah. "You will cooperate with Holt. You will cooperate with Keene. You will provide whatever they request." Deborah nodded, face tight. "Yes, sir." Caldwell looked at Claire as if seeing her for the first time. "Miss Morgan," he began, then stopped, unsure what name to use. "Colonel, this is unprecedented." Claire's voice stayed calm. "The highway does not care what your policies say." Caldwell swallowed. Keene turned to Caldwell. "We are done pretending this is a PR problem. This is a trauma system problem." Caldwell blinked. "We have protocols." Keene's eyes narrowed. Protocols did not stop a flatline. Caldwell's face reddened. "Dr. Pierce is being detained. We will conduct an internal review. We will discipline as needed." General Hale's voice was quiet and dangerous. "Your discipline will not touch him. Federal charges will." Caldwell's shoulders sagged. Deborah Lane exhaled slowly. "We also have a staffing crisis. We have press outside. We have a viral video. We have donors calling." Keene's voice cut through. "Then tell them the truth they can handle. Patient is alive. Facility is secure. Investigation ongoing." Deborah's eyes flicked to Holt. "And the person who performed the intervention." Holt's voice remained even. "Dr. Keene assumed care. That is the statement." Keene did not flinch. He understood the cost of shielding someone whose existence had become a target. "Fine," he said. Claire watched the conversation like an observer at her own trial. None of it felt real. None of it mattered the way Ethan's monitor mattered. General Hale turned to Claire. "Walk with me." They moved down a quiet corridor where donor portraits smiled from the walls. Through a window at the end of the hall, the parking lot looked like a media camp. News vans lined up like armored vehicles. Umbrellas clustered. Flashing camera lights popped against the rain. General Hale stopped at the window and stared out. "They will try to make you a headline," he said. Claire's face remained still. "They can try." General Hale looked at her eyes sharp. "You do not look afraid." Claire's voice was quiet. "Fear is a luxury." The general held her gaze. "You know I cannot let you disappear again." Claire's jaw tightened. "You cannot own me, sir." For a moment the air tensed. Then the general nodded once, acknowledging the boundary. "I do not want to own you," he said. "I want you alive." Claire stared at the crowd outside. "Then stop bringing war into hospitals." The general's mouth twitched slightly. "I did not bring it. I spent my life trying to keep it away from places like this." Claire's eyes did not soften, but her voice lowered. "It still found us." General Hale exhaled. "Yes." Behind them, Keene approached quietly. "Ethan's numbers are steady. ICU is holding." Claire turned her head slightly relieved, touching her eyes for the first time all night. It did not last. It did not need to. It existed. Keene continued. "Board meeting is scheduled for this morning. Emergency session. Caldwell will try to protect the hospital. They always do." Claire looked at Keene. "And you?" Keene's gaze held. "I protect patients." Claire nodded once. They walked back toward the elevators. As they passed a trash can near the corridor corner, Claire stopped. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the badge again. Claire Morgan, R.N. She held it for a beat, remembering months of silence, months of swallowed insults, months of being small on purpose. Then she dropped it into the trash. The plastic clacked softly against the bin's side and settled at the bottom like a finished chapter. Jess stood down the hall and saw it happen. Her eyes widened, then she pressed her lips together as if holding back a sound that would break her apart. Claire looked back at her just once. Jess straightened shoulders, squaring as if the gesture had given her permission to become someone braver. Keene watched Claire's hand leave the trash bin and nodded slightly. "Come on," he said. "You have rounds." Claire's brow lifted faintly. "I am not employed." Keene's voice stayed calm, not as a nurse. General Hale's eyes remained on her. "You do not get to stop working while my son is on a ventilator." Claire's mouth twitched almost a smile. "Yes, sir." They returned to ICU. The corridor still smelled faintly of extinguisher powder and disinfectant. The glass still had cracks where rounds had hit. Evidence tape marked a line on the floor. Yet the machines kept breathing. The nurses kept charting. The work continued because work was what held death back. Claire stopped outside Ethan's room and watched the monitor for a long second. The rhythm remained steady. Keene spoke quietly beside her. "He will wake later." Claire nodded. "When he does keep it quiet." Keene glanced at her. "Quiet is gone." Claire's eyes stayed on the line. "Then we build something stronger than quiet." Jess stepped closer, holding her shoulders like she was trying to keep them from shaking. "Rachel," she said, testing the name. Claire looked at her. "Yes." Jess swallowed. "If you are running trauma, what happens to doctors like Pierce?" Claire's expression remained even. "They learn." Keene's mouth twitched again approval. Holt stood at the far end of the hall, speaking into his phone, voice clipped. Marines shifted positions. Deputy Reeves and Ortega coordinated with an evidence team. The hospital settled into a new kind of order, one built on reality instead of paperwork. Claire took a breath and pushed the ICU door open. Inside, the air was warm and humming. Ethan lay still beneath bandages and lines, chest rising with the ventilator's help, face calmer now that the crisis had been held back. The monitor glowed green, counting time. Claire moved to the bedside and checked the drip rates with quick eyes. She adjusted nothing without confirming. She placed 2 fingers on Ethan's wrist and counted his pulse for a full cycle. Old habit, old respect. Then she looked at the ventilator settings and the dressings, and for the first time since the ambulance doors had blown open, her shoulders lowered slightly. She leaned in close, voice low, meant only for him. "You stay," she said. "That is the job." Ethan did not answer. The machine breathed for him. The monitor sang steady. Outside the room, the building remained under siege by cameras and questions. Inside, in the quiet light, the only thing that mattered was the thin, stubborn line that refused to go flat again.